Hi everyone, welcome back to Java 1 for All. In this video we are going to see how we can retrieve data from the database, and for that we are going to use ResultSet. So let's get started. Make sure that you have your database running, Docker Compose up. If your Docker Compose up is failing, it's because your Docker engine is not running. Now let's go to the producer repository, and in the producer repository we are going to copy the update method. So just copy this entire method, press enter, and add another one here. We rename this to let's start with findAll, and the findAll is going to return a list of producer. Producer, we don't need anything, we just return everything. And now for the SQL, basically to return everything, we did that before. We can do like this. This is from the previous video in Portuguese. We have the star represents everything, or we can bring one column or all the columns writing the name. For the sake of simplicity, I'm going to use the columns name, and you are going to understand why in a minute. So just copy the SQL, and then you add the entire SQL here, and you don't need it formatted anymore. Now, to query and get a result set, you have to execute a query. But to execute a query, you have to do it through a statement that's going to return a result set, and a result set needs to be closed as well. So since the result set needs to be closed, let's add here a semicolon inside the try with resources, and then we type result set rs, and then statement.execute query, passing the SQL. So the log here is not needed, and this one is also not needed. And the error trying to find all producers, and we don't have any argument here or here. Okay, so how does the execute query works? So I have a diagram here that explains how it will work. The first time you run execute query, it's going to have like a cursor pointing to nothing. And then if you remember the iterator, basically you have to go one by one. So for as many rows as we have to go ResultSet.next, and if we have a row, it's going to return true. Once we don't have rows anymore, it's going to return false. So basically we have to write a while where we are going to have the result set going one by one, and each one of these columns is going to become a Java object, and each one of these rows is going to become a Java object, and each one of these columns is going to become, each one of these cells, more precisely, is going to become an attribute. And for example, ID, if you go back to Workbench, is int. Here at the schemas, if you select producer, we have ID, that's integer, and then name, that's varchar. If you are not sure how to map, just go to IBM or just search like SQL type to Java type, and in this IBM you have the SQL type and basically the Java types that you have to map. But since we only have two, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, continuing now, since we are going to return a list of producer, let's create here outside the try. And why are we going to create winner outside the try? Because I want to return even though we don't have any data. So for example, right now I will come all the way to the end here, and I'm going to return producers. So if there is no data available in my table, basically I'm going to return a empty list. And this is honestly a good practice. When you return null, it's kind of difficult because you have to handle that null, but when you are returning empty collection, it's easier because you basically have access to the object. Now, while rs dot next, and then we need to get exactly the type. So we have get int, get string, get boolean, and so on. But as you can see here, we have two different options. One is the column index, and be careful with this because always it starts with 1. So if I want to get the ID, it starts with 1. Never is going to start with 0. Or, and in my opinion the best way, is to get it by the name of the column. So the order then doesn't matter. So we have get int and we have get string, and this one is called name. Perfect. But we don't have the object itself yet. How can we create the object? Remember that we have producer, we have a nice builder. So basically we can pass here the ID. We just copy this entire line to the ID here, remove this, and same thing here, you pass the get string. So the get string is going to return the value from the name. So if we look at here, the ID is going to return 1 and then Madhouse. So this will be the first producer object that we are going to build. So producer, and now if you want, this looks a little bit better. We need to add to producers list our producer. So for the first time we are iterating, we are going to get the one Madhouse. We are going to create a producer object, then we are going to add to the list. And the next iteration, we are going to have the cursor here, and then we will have in HK, and we will have the second object, and so on. At the end, we will return everything to whoever is calling. Usually in real programs, when you have to deploy, you don't have findAll, because this is quite dangerous. Someone can get your entire database without any restrictions. So after we finish with repository, we have to go to the service. Basically, you just copy the update, you remove the arguments, you change the name to findAll, and the return now is a list of producer, import class, remove this one, and we are going to return findAll with no argument. Cool, findAll. Now we go all the way to connection factory test. We remove the update, and then we can create here producer service, findAll, introduce local variable producers, and then log.info producers found, and then comma producers. Control Shift F10. And as you can see, we have all the producers from our database available now in our Java as objects. So for the findAll, that's it. In the next video, we are going to see how we can actually add conditions where, for example, name equals something. Pretty straightforward. I think you can do it by yourself, but we are going to do it anyway in the next video. So see you there. Bye bye.